And we're joined now in the studio by Professor William Gumede to talk a little bit more about these developments. I think I'd just like to look at the addition of a new position, that of a second Deputy Secretary General. You might have heard some of that conversation that Vuyo Mvoko had earlier on with his guests about whether it's lobbying or horse trading. But I want to ask the question whether it is reflective of that, as we've heard rumors of money exchanging hand, or the challenge that you and I were talking about earlier on, that of the organizational structure and discipline.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be with you again tonight. I wanted just to take it, the conversation around Limpopo and the governance aspect of it. Mm-hmm. For example, from a governance point of view, and even from a party governance point of view, the branch have a branch general meeting, which is legal. And then they make a proposal, a nomination. Then they send the delegate to vote on their behalf from a legally constituted meeting. Now, if the delegate arrives at a conference and then is persuaded to vote differently, there is the possibility that a branch back home can say, look, we will take you to court, because legally we constituted a branch general meeting which is legal, and we've delegated you. You cannot reverse unless you come back to us and we constitute another special general meeting.
And Professor Gumede, this is exactly what I'm talking about, and I want us to reflect on that, because I want to understand not only the role, but as you say, the governance structure from the branch. Then we know that they also nominate to the regional executive committee to the provincial executive committee. Let's just listen into the conversation that my colleague Natasha Piri had earlier on to explain these developments. What exactly is happening? Because I want you to explain the different roles that they play, and within the context of this conference. Let's take a listen or a watch. All right, so we'll get back to that. We'll see if we can pull it up, that conversation. So please just explain. So you're saying that if somebody's mind has been changed, then it is illegal.
Essentially, because a branch general meeting has a legality, because it's a meeting. Somebody's mandated to vote in a certain way. They arrive at the national conference, and they need to vote according to that mandate. So those at home, the branch at home, could legally contest a change of the mandate because they didn't give that mandate. They could say, look, our delegate must then come back and let's have a new meeting. So essentially, you're saying in terms of accountability, it's sort of a pyramid. The bottom it informs what happens at the top. Let's listen again to what exactly happened, and if you can unpack that for us.
You would know that in the Provincial Conference of the African National Congress in Limpopo, a decision was taken by conference that as a province we are going to support the president for second term. And of course, during the nomination processes, branches overwhelmingly endorsed the president of the African National Congress, President Cyril Ramaphosa, to be elected for second term so that he can be able to continue with the project of organizational renewal and redesign. Of course, today we're quite surprised as branches, but most importantly as regions. When the PEC, through its provincial deputy chair, made a very surprising announcement that they have decided to take entry. And of course, from that point, we then appreciated the fact that the PEC has abdicated its responsibility to lead this program of ensuring that we deliver President Cyril Ramaphosa in this conference. And that is why immediately, because in our considered view, that is amounts to leadership throwing towels in the air and saying we can't lead this anymore, and we needed to close that particular vacuum. The leadership of the ANC in Norman Mashabane through its regional chairperson, Comrade Puleshai, the regional chairperson of Bitamukaba through its chairperson, John Mbe, the leadership of Bembe through its chairperson, Chitereke, the leadership of Kukune through its regional secretary, Waterberg through its chair and secretary were quite clear, unflinching, that they would not be taken to entry for reasons that are not known to the branches.
That's my colleague Natasha Piri speaking to Hassan Goben, who's the regional spokesperson of the Norman Mashabane region in Limpopo. And I'd like to continue with that analogy of the road. The N3 is a national road. So I wanted to connect the understanding of the roles of the branches, the RECs, the PEC, and how it forms where we are now, the road to national. So you were talking about the governance structure there. The ANC has, at various conferences for more than 25 years now, adopted papers that speak to the organizational democracy and discipline, as it talks about in the movement, the character thereof. So this behavior that we're seeing, is it alien? I mean, people have been writing already last year, already opinion makers saying, we're going to see if the branches are going to push back against from this principle.
So the ANC's, the principle that guides the ANC is democratic centralism. Now, democratic centralism clashes with the constitution. It's like patriarchy in our society. It clashes with the constitution. To modernize the ANC, to renew the ANC, there has to be alignment between the country constitution and the ANC's constitution. So that alignment is not there. Now, the country's constitution is our supreme document. It's above everything else. It's above any other organization's institution, whether it's a political party or whether it's a church. So if there's a class, then an individual, a political party, a member, a branch can actually go to court and say, our rights here have been abrogated.
And you and I started this conversation yesterday about the structure of the ANC, particularly the provinces, how it informs the efficacy of governance. Let's listen now to what the Gauteng Premier Panyaza Lesufi had to say about this position from Gauteng. And we'll continue with this conversation, particularly from the viewpoint of it being a broad church, democracy versus that centralism. Let's take a listen and watch.
We indicated the people that we are supporting, the President, Cyril Ramaphosa, for him to be the President, Comrade Paul Mashatile to be Deputy President, and Comrade Nomvola Mkonyani to be the Deputy SG, and Comrade Chuku Matawata to be the National Chair. That was the position of the PEC, and that position was taken to the branches. And when the branches came back, they added the name of David Masondo for National Chair, Comrade Mtumiseni and Comrade Mbadula for SG, and Comrade Bulemabi and Comrade Mzwandile Masina for Treasurer. On the basis of that, this morning we convened a caucus of ANC, Gauteng, and the caucus mandated the chair and the provincial secretary to start the official negotiations with other provinces. So we are in that space now where other provinces have exchanged notes with us. We are considering their notes and we'll reconvene.
And how is the brokering?
No, it's not bad. I think it's it's contrary to popular belief. I really believe there might be some position where there can be consensus, but obviously people are in the mood to vote and elect, so you can't take that nice part where people have to sing songs about their leaders and also fantasy. But we as Gauteng, were the provinces that have approached us, the provinces we have approached, and late in this afternoon, I think we'll consolidate our slate, share it with our delegates, and allow our delegates to go and vote.
Professor William Gumede is a political analyst and governance expert. So he continues this discussion with me. We talk about democratic centralism against what we've just heard there. You were speaking about modernization earlier on. Banyaza Lisufi talking about consensus. And you know, just in terms of how the ANC describes itself, it says that it's a movement that relates to bring established traditions of building a broad church and hegemonic organization that does not seek to define itself in its exclusivist or narrow ideological terms. So it's almost at odds with each other. It sounds to me like there are competing priorities. Is this why we are seeing a pushback from some of the structures within the ANC? And can it be interpreted like that? Or can the ANC simply say, well, you just don't understand our ways?
I mean, you know, I think the first thing is that we sort of said is that the individual delegates can access, because it's a secret vote, they can vote still according to the mandates, because it's a secret vote. So they can go there. Yes, there will be a lot of pressure on them, obviously from the provincial executive leadership, but they can still follow the consensus or follow the mandate that they got back from home, and that will be the consensus following the consensus. So that is obviously still possible. Now, there's a real danger for the ANC if they don't manage this, that potentially, the results of the election can be contested afterwards. And then the courts will have to make a pronunciation. So that will be the first time at the ANC National Conference that it will happen. You know, it has happened at the provincial conferences. It happened in the Eastern Cape and so on. You know, we had a problem in the Free States and in the province ahead of this conference. So now the ANC is edging closer now to the possibility that branch members and branches back at home who gave the delegates a mandate, and then the delegates were persuaded to vote otherwise, that they actually can go to court, and the ANC's final election could be null and void. And that's the one real potential danger. The second potential danger, I mean, this so far has been certainly the most divisive, the most defamatory, and the most toxic election campaign, certainly since the ANC was unbanned in 1990. So, there is a possibility that branches or individuals who feel that that their mandate has been subverted, could actually break away afterwards. So there's also a potential of another Congress of the People type of breakaway after this. So really they have to use wisdom here, and they have to look at it in a grown-up way.
And I want to talk about that introspection that is needed, and it's done. Dr. Vilakazi was saying to Vuyo earlier on, referring to something that Mambale Gambete said about the ANC and its need for cleansing against this backdrop of what President Cyril Ramaphosa said in his political report of renewal. You spoke about modernization. So I want to understand the source of it. Is it a clash of ethics? Is there a lack of transparency in what is happening at the moment? Or is it a difference in ideologies? We are talking about various camps now. We're talking about the RET forces. There's white monopoly capital. If we're saying the ANC is imploding, what is the source of that? Because as we've said, policies are clearly not going to be discussed here. What are people negotiating on the basis of?
The ANC as a movement during the party, there was a liberation movement. Now, the thing about a liberation movement is a broad church. Now, a liberation movement is not set up to manage a state. It is not set up to make policies. It is not set up to execute policies. That is why, from a liberation movement, when the party gets into government, it must make the transition to a party, which now is, it must flip, and now you need different capabilities in the leadership to make it possible. But then you must also change your structures, your governance structures, to make it possible. Now, the reason why almost all of the liberation movements in Africa since 1945 has failed is they've been unable to make that change from liberation movements, which is set up to oppose, almost like an NGO that opposes. Now, when you get into government, then you need capability, you need professionalization, you need merit-based, you need one set of policies. You can't be a broad church. You can't be a catch-all party. You have to decide, this is the direction we're going. Everyone follows this direction, and you choose a policy, and then also a governing party must govern in the interest of everyone in a society. Now, a movement, opposition movement, liberation movement, governs for its own. It's like a bit of a cult for your own.
And it's quite interesting because you mentioned earlier on that the possibility of seeing another COPE-like breakaway because of this. And one can say a contemporary example, which we've seen literally several days ago, of the problems with democratic centralism was what Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma was saying was the autocratic or dictatorial character of it. And just looking at how the ANC describes itself, it says its culture is that of democratic and open debate that'll come up with the most progressive policies. And this is what I'm trying to figure out, that are all of these at odds with each other, what they have been telling themselves, and at what point did there become a chasm? Is it that patriarchy has become so deeply entrenched? President Ramaphosa speaking about in his political report that we need to be wary of corruption and that we need to be seen as serving the people. He spoke about the need for a younger generation of leadership. All of these, which some have said, seem to be themes that are recurring in what is likely to occur over the next tenure of the ANC. Can the ANC deliver that?
So, when you're a liberation movement and you're now in the bush and you fight, democratic centralism is actually often quite important. In fact, sometimes having democratic centralism, essentially what does democratic centralism is the leadership decides, the members follow. And it is done in such a way it's almost like a military-like, because you want to have a cohesive force, because you're fighting an autocratic government. And the more you're cohesive and the more close-knit you are, the better you fight. Now, when you run a democratic government, you cannot be like that. Then it's democracy. Then it is your individual members, your supporters have a voice. You can't just give them the line. They have a voice, and you have to listen to the voice, and there has to be votes, and so on. So now the ANC has struggled to make that transition then from that democratic centralism within the organization to change to democracy inside your organization. So, and there's a difference between democratic centralism. Democratic centralism is the leadership decides. Democracy is everyone has a say. Everyone decides, we debate, we come out with a decision, and that's the decision. Whereas in democratic centralism, the leadership decides, everyone else follows.
And it takes me back to what the Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana was saying earlier on, that he has no sense of anxiety over who emerges as a leader. The economy itself has buffered well. or rather has reacted well to the changes in leadership, even when presidents have been recalled. There was no immediate or substantive impact to the economy. How does then that relate to what you're saying, especially if you're saying the macro and microeconomic policy is not going to change? Yet we know that some of the contestation within the party is precisely over some of these issues.
Absolutely. I mean, I respectfully disagree with you because we've seen, when President Jacob Zuma, when he was the president, and he fired then Finance Minister Provincial, and, we've lost at that time, that one single day, 300 billion rands off the stock exchange. There's real jobs gone, investment gone. And so it's real, it impacts on ordinary people. They feel it. What happens here in the ANC, we're going to feel it. Ordinary people are going to feel it. But I want to go back again, your earlier question in terms of, that liberation movement, that transition which the ANC has been struggling with. It is what Thabo Mbeki used to call the renewal, and also Ramaphosa calls the renewal, that difficulty. Now, when you fight as a liberation movement, you actually only have one policy. And that policy is fight against the apartheid government or colonial government. Yeah. Now, when you come to government and you don't change, then that one focus changes to a fight for resources, for the state, to capture the state. That is why President Ramaphosa in his political reports yesterday said it's not about ideology anymore inside the ANC. It's now about who can capture the state. When you capture the state, you can look at all the resources, you can control investigations, you can control who gets investigated for corruption. You're in charge. So that is what the fight is all about now.
And of course, this occurs within a different environment of multi-party democracy. Thank you so much for speaking to us.